Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. In particular, I've started coding the attacks made on monsters by the player character or their companions. I want to talk about this element over two videos rather than one, which is how I talked about when the enemies attack the player character or the companions, because when the player characters attack, when the player character or a companion attacks, it's a little bit more complicated. In particular, when you make a very good attack roll, there's quite a lot of options about what can happen. So let's have a look at that. Of course, this is all in this passage, PC side attacks, as you might expect. There are no new variables that we're going to talk about. We might actually see a new variable, but I don't want to talk about it just yet because I'm not sure if it's necessary. I'm in the middle of I did it, and I'm sort of talking about it to the person who's making the game. So I don't want to say something that I'm then going to sort of walk back. So let's have a look at PC side attacks. So once we get here, the player has chosen the target, and we've stored the number of the target. So if it's 3, that means we're attacking enemy 3, and so on, in the variable Z. And we have a text, which is the weapon name plus the number, so pistol space 2. And that is used, we have that text because one of the two variables that deals with the player character and companion's weapons uses text like that instead of numbers. And so that having that text makes it easy to reference a particular attack. Of course, we need to know what attack we're doing because although the attacks basically work the same, there are some differences, and there's certainly differences in damage. There's also what we've yet to code, some differences in how ammunition works, whether making an attack consumes ammunition or sometimes consumes the weapon, like a grenade. If you throw a grenade, you don't have that grenade anymore, for example. And that of course is another way in which the attacks from this side are more complicated than attacks from the monsters. So so we've gone through the actual process of making the rolls. So we have the 2d6 plus the relevant score minus the sneaky score of the target, and then we had these this else if structure. So it's down there to sort of remind me that this space is here to remind me that that's where the code has to go, if that makes sense. That obviously looks a bit weird, and in a completed bit of code I wouldn't lay it out like that, but that's just to let me know that there's sort of, that's where the missing bit is, if that makes sense. But we didn't have any of the code that deals with the consequences of that branching. So we had if y3 is the number that we end up with finally when we've done all the adjusting. If y3 is less than 4, we just had the text long failure. Else if it's less than 7, that's a failure. And if it's higher than that, it's either a success or a long success. But we hadn't coded any of the consequences of that, nor had we coded continuing the program, because of course the program doesn't end with a single attack. It has to make that attack, update things as necessary, and then proceed to whatever happens next. So let's deal with that. So if it's less than 4, we have a long failure. And I decided to have 2 possible bad consequences that can happen in a long failure, which is that either, and each of which has a 50% chance of happening. And so we have a random 0, 1. We just sort of effectively toss a coin. If we get a 1, this one happens. And if we get a 0, the other one happens. The other one, this one takes considerably less code. It's considerably simpler than taking damage, because taking damage can have a lot more different consequences, I suppose. So the first option is that the attacker falls prone. And to do that, we already have talked about the prone array. $I&I underscore WHO, that's who's acting. So it'll be 0 if it's the player character. It'll be 1 or 2 if it's companion 1 or companion 2. We just set the relevant slot of the prone array to 1, and then we go to next action. So if that was the character's first action of the turn, because they get 2 actions each go, their next action will automatically be that they stand up. So they just sort of waste a turn. If it's the second action of the turn, then they will remain down until their next go, and then they'll stand up on the first turn of their next turn. The first action of their next turn, sorry. So the other option, as you can see, there's a lot more that can happen. That one goes all the way down to here. So there's a lot more code happening. The other one is that the attacker takes 1 damage. So then we branch based on who is taking damage. And that's if I&I underscore who is equal to 0. And the reason for that is because we store the hit points of the player character in its own variable, whereas we store the hit points of the companions in the com array. So they're set in different places, and so therefore different things need to be reduced by 1. I mean, there's probably a way to kind of have a single variable that deals with that, but, you know, I've done it as it is now, so it's probably easier to just leave it as is. But if I&I underscore who is equal to 0, meaning the player character is acting, we reduce $HP by 1. $HP is the player character's hit points, of course. And then if HP is now 0, we include game over. Now, this is the new variable that we weren't going to talk about. I have an array for if players are, or if people on the player character's side are injured, which means that their hit points go to 4 or less. But I'm not sure it's actually needed. I'm sort of talking to the, as I said, I'm talking to the person whose game this is about whether we need that, so we'll sort of brush over that for now. But if we're not going to game over, which is just going to say, you know, you've died, it's the end of the game, and possibly there'll be a picture or something. If that's not the case, then we just go straight to next action. So that's if the player character takes damage. And if that's not the case, well, it must be a companion taking damage. So we set com I&I underscore WHO 2, because 2 indicates the slot where we're keeping track of their hit points. And then if their hit points now equal 0, again, we're not talking about injured. Why would we set it to why would we set injured to 0 if they're dead? Wouldn't they be injured if they're dead? Well, we do that in case a new companion comes and fills up that slot. We don't want to accidentally have that new companion with the tag that they're injured, or with that slot set to 1, because of course they're meant to be uninjured, that they're a new companion. So that's why we do that. And then we say companion such and such is dead, companion 2 is dead, or whatever it may be. Again, that's to do with the injured array, which I said I wasn't going to talk about, but I have talked about it, so, you know, whatever. But anyway, the important thing is we reduce their hit points by 1. We say that they're dead if they're dead, and then we move on to the next action. And those are all the options for a long failure, which is a very bad failure, a total of 3 or less. If it's just a normal failure, which means it's less than 7, but it's not less than 4, in other words, it's 4, 5 or 6, it's way simpler. We just say failure, and then we go on to the next action. Actually, I think I forgot to put, I should have put a couple of line breaks there. Otherwise, we'll have the same text on the same line. So sorry about that. I'll fix that in the version that I upload. And if that's not the case, well, then it must be a success. And then it's either a success or a long success. And then things get complicated. More complicated than they do when a monster gets a long success. So I'm going to deal with that part of the attack next video. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.